Hi, everyone. It's Kelly from the Hub here today with our friend Will. You remember him. He is our development coordinator at the library and our resident expert on everything bee. Hello there, Will.
Hey, how are you?
As well.
Last time what did we talk about? We talked about kind of the natural history of the bee.
Yep.
And
And you define them as cranky vegan communists. And I have to say that might be what they are called nationally now. I think that other people have chosen to pick up that little moniker for them. And I think it fits well. I've been doing bee research since you talked about that. You're spot on, man.
I better trademark that or something. Maybe trademark it for the library or something like that. And we'll start a blog. We'll do something like that. Because yeah, it's definitely right on. And I thought today we could talk a little bit about where they fit into the ecosystem, because we kind of looked at like what they were up to in their hive and what they were doing. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here.
Sure.
And bring up a picture. So this was last year at my house.
You built a hive in a tree.
In a tree, exactly. And as you can see, let me zoom in. Whoops. How do I zoom in here? As you can see, there's a pile of bees on the front of this hive. And you'll recognize it's a hive, not very big. It's maybe the size of like 2 shoe boxes or something in terms of volume.
Yeah.
So you put 2 shoe boxes next to each other, you combine them, or maybe you have like a giant pair of boots or something. That's the size of this hive. You also observed it's up in a tree. This is what's used by hunters to climb up into trees. It's
like a tree stand. So you used an old tree stand to do it.
An old tree stand and strapped it to this hickory tree. And you see a bunch of bees hanging out in here. Now, what's going on? Why is there a pile of bees that, look at all those bees.
They look like they're like falling out or like excited to get in either way.
Right. And so I was on a conference call last year. Oh, this was, I want to say May or June. And I heard in my yard buzzing, and I looked out and I could see bees everywhere in the yard. I said, bingo, jackpot. I have caught a swarm. So we talked a little bit about swarms last time. The bees split up their hives, and that's their reproductive process. There's sort of an internal reproductive process where the queen lays eggs to make more workers. But when your house gets too crowded, let's say you grew up in your parents' house and then you want to have kids in your parents' house and then they want to have kids. At some point, everybody needs to split houses and go to another house. Well, that's what bees do. As soon as they get to be too crowded, half of them will move out, and they'll split the hive roughly down the middle and send half of them out on a mission to find a place to live.
Huh.
What is that place? Well, it is up in a tree, just like this. So this is a hickory tree. I picked this tree sort of through trial and error, and I believe it's the reason that they were coming to this tree is that bees like hickory trees. Now, why would they like a hickory tree? They also like gum trees or tupelo trees, if you're familiar with that. And I would say, if you're looking for a wildlife tree, tupelo is the greatest thing you can do in southeastern Pennsylvania. But why do they like these trees? Well, bees live in cavities. So they live off the ground in cavities that are roughly, this is a weird measurement, but 40 liters in volume. So that is the space that's ideal for them to live in. And this box is roughly 40 liters. If you took 2-liter bottles of Coke and you poured 20 of those in here, it would basically be the same volume. And the bees need that space in order to build up their hive. It can't be too big because they can't sort of heat it up. It can't be too small because they won't be able to fit. So bees are looking for cavities in the environment that are about that size. Now, what else uses a cavity of that size? Well, just about everything else.
I was going to say, like raccoons do that, and larger birds have like nests like that or like that size.
Squirrels have huge family groups. Yeah, squirrels have huge family groups that live in trees and live in cavities. We had one in my yard that we ended up taking the tree down So you could actually see the cavity, and lo and behold, it was about the size of this
Wow.
hive. So bees have a place in the environment as a cavity nesting animal. And we talked a little bit last time about how bees were not native to North America. Well, it's interesting. They will displace other, like there will be animals that would rather have that little cavity that they're hiding in and that hidey hole, and they will totally take over that area. So that's specific to honeybees. So what am I doing in this picture? I am simulating the hidey hole up in the tree by putting this cavity that smells a little bit like wax, because I put actual old bee comb inside of there and hung it up in the tree. And sure enough, this one brought in 3 swarms last year or something like that. And I was just kept catching them.
You did build it and they will come.
Yes.
You didn't find a swarm and then scoop them into it. You created an open apartment building for them to move in.
Yes. So there's a scientist named Tom Seeley, Seeley. He's pretty much the preeminent expert in honeybees, especially honeybee behavior. He has a whole range of books that are just awesome books. He's very accessible writer. He gets things across to you. I might have one over here. But in any case, Tom Seeley has done a lot of studies of this, and he did it by in honeybee behavior when it comes to flying out to these nests. He had an island off the coast of New York that he could experiment on, and there was no other island around it, so he could see where bees go when they only have several options. Let's see. He did Following the Wild Bees. This is a book about how to trap bees and follow bees and hunt the bees. So you can actually find bees yourself. He did. This is his classic book, Honeybee Democracy, and also a very good one with a lot of his studies in it and a lot of what his students were up to. But what he basically found out is that bees send out, when they're ready to split up their hive, they send out scouts, and the scouts go around in a certain area around the hive, maybe a square mile, and they look for new places to live. And so they are scouting out. And so they'll fly to every tree. They'll fly up and down the tree, looking around. Oh, we found a hole. They'll fly inside. And he actually was managed to track down the bees and track down what they did when they were inside of this hidey hole looking around. And they have criteria, and the little bees have little criteria that they decide on. They'll climb around. They'll bounce back and forth between the sides of the hole, try to go up and down, side to side, try to figure out how big it is. And then they'll fly back, and they actually have a democratic decision-making process of the swarm, which is this big old group of bees. They fly up on a tree before they move into their new home, and they decide through a series of dances how they will move into which home they're going to move into. And he did a lot of work staring at these big clumps of bees, which is 10,000 bees, something like that, staring at them, trying to figure out what they were doing. So this is a lot of boring research work, but he figured this out. So this is the honeybees process for where they live. But since we're talking about all types of bees, I want to bring up another type of bee, which is a mason bee. And what you can see here is a super up close image of a log I carved out. And it actually looks a little bit, my zoom is in the way, a little bit like this.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yes. So if you have a 3/8 inch drill bit or 5/16, either one is pretty good. Drill 6-inch holes into a log. The solitary bees, called mason bees, will move in, and it was pretty incredible. I think I did my little mason bee house in the winter, and by the spring, here you can see that they have created little caps on there. So they actually they lay their eggs inside, and then they lay their eggs inside of these holes, and then they cap them off with mud. And if you'll see this one, there is a bit of fluff here.
Oh, that's not like snow. That's like whatever.
This
Stuff
was
from
taken in the
fabric.
spring.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm not sure is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Because I have actually set up these little houses before. We're actually going to try to get the kids to do it this summer for summer reading, to
Excellent.
set up these houses. I don't know. That could be good. It could be that's just like the fluff that they put in there for the baby bees. Or it could be that something went in there and killed them and ate them, which I did watch happen once. But what you can see from this is that the bees are building their own homes, right? With honeybees, they're claiming these cavity nests. With these mason bees, they're literally claiming little holes that are in logs and things like that. And they have a role in the ecosystem that way. If you want to attract bees to your property, looking like this is not the worst thing. What does this look like to you, Kelly?
Well, it looks like you should probably do some property cleanup because it's sort of junky.
It's sort of junky. However, this right here, this was taken in upstate PA in November or so, up in north central PA. But you get the idea. This is a bunch of fallen down trees, brush, yard trash is
Right.
what you'd say. Here's a stump down here. You've got this kind of a mess, right? Look, bees love this. This is prime bee territory right here, because
Even
each
though
of
it's
those,
on the ground?
even though it's on the ground, so those mason bees, they'll fly right into this and they'll find a home. They'll figure out how to get in there so that they don't get wet, and they'll put their eggs in there. Bumblebees will do ground nests underneath these logs. You'll have every type of thing. If you are looking for a way to bring bees into your neighborhood, bring bees into your yard, you need to not clean up things. Exactly what you talked about, right? And the best part about it is that you can be as lazy as you want, and the lazier you are, the better habitat it is for bees in a sense. The other thing you can do is, if you're in a kind of your typical suburban house where you have a couple trees and you have a tree taken down, is leave the stump there, or even leave part of the stump there, and you'll find that animals will move into there. Is it dirty? I guess, yes, right. It's not as clean as a grass lawn, but a grass lawn doesn't do anything for the bees. They need
a grass lawn doesn't do anything for almost anything.
for almost anything, except for humans like it.
Yeah, and
they
worms.
seem to like it.
But I think worms like other messy stuff too. So
Worms, you'll find lots of worms in this type of environment. So what I'm trying to get across here is that when it comes to empty cavities in trees, when it comes to rotten wood, when it comes to holes in wood, that's really the space that bees are occupying. And it's not really what you would think of, right? You'd think of bees are in these clean hives that are up in trees, right? Like the one you just saw.
And I have actually never seen hives up in trees before. I've always just seen those like bright white hives that people put like, I don't know, like near a woodland space.
Yep. And you know what? The bees like that just fine.
Okay.
But there's a couple reasons why bees prefer to be up in a tree. And maybe you can try to give that a guess.
Closer to flowers.
Okay.
Less disturbance from us.
Yep.
And ground living things.
Yep.
And I would say, okay, does breeze have anything to do with it, like light wind?
Yeah, so you've identified a couple things. One of them is proximity to forage and things that they can eat. Could be they do a lot of pollinating on trees, and we'll talk about pollination in a minute here. But yeah, that for them, flying up into the air, I mean, whatever. For them, they can go vertical, they can go horizontal, like they're pretty much fine. And so if they're starting out from up in the air, that means they have less time that they have to fly up. But the second one is a huge one, is animals like raccoons, possums, skunks, bears, humans all eat their hard work, their honey and their larvae and all the good stuff. So when it comes to getting away from predators, they can eliminate a lot of stuff by being real high up in a tree. My tree stand that I put that in was like 12 feet off the ground, maybe 10 feet off the ground, but they really would love to be 30 feet off the ground where they're not going to get bothered too much. And they can set up a couple bees on defense and then they're good. You know, they can live out their life way up in the tree. And honestly, you're not going to find a lot of bees in the wild when you go out looking for a couple reasons, but it's going to be very hard to find them because they're going to be up in a tree. Right. So if there are honeybees in the forest near your house, you're going to have to be looking up a lot of the time to find them. And you mentioned the last one was the breeze.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah. It just came to me.
Well, you know, they have to keep the hive. What's funny about a beehive and taking care of their larvae and taking care of their babies is that they want to be at around 98.6 degrees. In the hive, right, in the nest where they have all the baby bees, which is funny, right? That's why is that the temperature? Well, it's a great temperature for raising young, right? Is you keep them very warm, but they have to cool off the hive if it starts to get too hot. So being up in a tree is not a bad place. You can you probably have a little bit better ability to get that breeze to cool things off. In the winter, when all the leaves are off the tree, it's going to warm up. It's going to get hit by the sun first. So there's a lot of thermal requirements that they have, and a lot of things they have to worry about as a hive. So actually, when you often in the summer, you will see hives where it looks like this, and you'll see a bunch of bees hanging off the front of it. That's a mechanism they use to cool things off. Is what happens when your house is too hot? You go sit out on the deck. Well, they do the same thing. If their hive is too hot, they'll do that. But you mentioned, I'm going to pull this off here as I try to find a good picture for you. You mentioned pollination. That was what else I was going to talk about in terms of their role in the ecosystem. What do you know about pollination and and bees pollinating plants?
Kelly? So what everyone I think learns in school is that flowers have pollen on them, and all the kinds of flowers, and that bees need to pick up that pollen from lots of different kinds of things and sprinkle it around everywhere so that plants can reproduce. And then they use that pollen, like what the sprinkles off of them helps to reproduce plants, and then what they bring to their hive makes the honey that we all eat. I think that's sort of like the classic definition of how bees work and why they're important.
That's great. Excellent. So you identified that. So if we didn't have bees, what you can see here, this was Sarah's idea, this was my wife's idea, was if you don't have bees around, we would have to pollinate ourselves.
Right.
And this was sort of something, they actually have done it in China to some degree of success. And we did it in our own yard with our peach trees. So these are peach blossoms, and we're using a chicken feather to hand pollinate our blossoms. So you can transfer the pollen from one flower to another, which is what a bee would do. A bee is a little fuzzy creature, right? The pollen sticks to them. And after they're done rooting around in a flower, a bee looks like it's dirty, right? You'll find pictures of bees where they're just absolutely encrusted in pollen. This is what we would have to do if we didn't have bees, is you would have to hand pollinate.
And that's actually, don't scientists, I mean, they used to do in the day, if they wanted to create a different kind of species, they would take two different kinds, or actually, if they wanted to create qualities that were better, they could do that, like this kind of carrot and this kind of carrot. I don't know if carrots might not make flowers, but something else, apples that do. And then they could make a better kind of an apple if they cross-pollinated it themselves.
Exactly.
Letting bees take the chance of how they do it.
I was trying to find a picture in here, but yes, exactly. So this is definitely, it definitely works. I mean, you're doing some pollination, and you can, like you said, do some customizing, who was that? Gregor Mendel was
Yes.
tracking down all of the different plants and what they were, how they were breeding and things like that. But what is this? This is time consuming.
Oh, it takes forever.
Takes forever. You have to be very delicate. You can't just get the feather and just slap it around. Yeah, that's not going to work, right? This is a very tough process to do without the bees' help. So what are bees doing? They're out there pollinating plants. Now, you did mention that carrots and apples do have flowers. They definitely do. In the case of the carrots, that's a root of the plant.
Yeah.
It's a root vegetable. But carrots have a seed as well that's through a flower. There are plants that do not use flowers in the same way for bee pollination. Those are wind pollinated plants. And the best example of that is corn. Corn has the tassels on the corn plant, right? That said, right, they can just use the wind to spread pollen around. That said, it's been found that bees do a non-insignificant amount of work on wind pollinating plants. Your grass in your yard, if you let it go to seed, those are flowers of a wind pollinated variety, and they will they will definitely go to seed if you let them.
Yep.
But you might see bees on there at one point or another. So the where bees fit in is in the pollination process for these plants that require a pollinator to do the work. Wind pollination is kind of random, right? You're waiting for the wind to do it. This type of pollination where you're using a pollinator, this is much more intentional. It's much more based on the symbiosis that the bee has with the flower. So let me see if I could find any other pictures. But it's definitely a process of mutual help, because what do the bees get off of the flower, and what does the flower get? Well, the flower gets this pollination service where the bee is doing the work of spreading the pollen around. What does the bee get? The bee gets pollen and it gets nectar off the flower. So what makes a flower smell good? In part, it's the nectar, but the flower is looking to attract the bee with nice smells. What is pollen and what is nectar in terms of the bee's diet? Pollen is the protein, nectar is the carbohydrate. So nectar gets transformed into honey through dehydration. So when they collect a whole bunch of nectar, they bring it to their hive, they flap their wings, and they dry out the nectar until it turns into a really thick honey, which is what you want, right? The good stuff. The pollen is the protein that they need. So if you ate nothing but eggs, right, which is protein, you would be all right. But every once in a while, you want some carbs. If you eat nothing but carbs and no protein, you're not going to be very good either. You need both, right? And that's what bees get from their relationship with flowers, is they get both a protein and a carbohydrate. And those are both collected by humans. I mean, you can collect the pollen out of a hive and eat it. And in fact, it's very good food. And there's all these legends from small Russian villages where they eat nothing but bee pollen and they live to 150 and things like that. I don't know how much
bee pollen in like natural food stores.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And it's what it is it's a complete food. You could actually eat nothing but bee pollen and you would survive. It has all your amino acids. Not a great diet, but doesn't taste great, I guess. But honey, of course, is the other product, and everybody likes it because it's so sweet. Before I keep going, do you have any questions about the pollination process and what bees are getting out of it versus what the plants are getting out of it?
No, but we might want to save this part for another time, but I get so excited about it. When colony collapse disorder showed up, and there's a lot to talk about that. That was when people really, I think before that, there were backyard beekeeping people.
Sure.
And then nobody else cared about bees unless you got stung. That was it.
Yeah.
And I think when colony collapse disorder showed up, a lot of people cared a lot about bees. And then I think we all learned more than than our 6th grade knowledge of how bees worked to make sure that we didn't lose bees. And so
Sure.
I find that to be fascinating, and that now really accessible outlets like Pinterest and whatever want you. I mean, there's a lot out there on keeping bees near you all the time and how you do that. And I find that fascinating that that movement went from really sort of highbrow academics to super accessible things that pre-K kids do quickly.
Yeah,
I find that fascinating.
it was definitely one of those moments where people kind of said, "Uh-oh, what are we going to do?"
Yeah.
Because so many of the plants we've mentioned, right? Well, we mentioned two, right? We mentioned carrots, apples. Those are both plants where you need a pollinator in the process.
Right.
You need a pollinator in there to be producing the food. Otherwise, you're back to using a chicken feather to hand pollinate everything.
Right.
There's some percentage, and I can't remember, but it's about a third of the food on your plate is coming from the work of some bee, like this bumblebee you can see here. Could be a carpenter bee. I think he is covered in pollen now.
I was going to say his legs look awfully full of like yellow stuff. Yep. Look at that.
That's there it is right there. So this is an echinacea flower. It's a great one for bees. You can see all that great pollen on there. They just love climbing around in there. It was really a wake-up call for agriculture, and also just what normal people could be doing. But to go back to what I was saying before, a lot of people say, well, I want to help the bees to make sure we have agriculture.
Right.
Should I keep bees? Should I?
Right.
What should I be doing? Should I plant a garden in my yard?
Yeah.
Look, those are good things, and I'm not going to tell you that they're not good things. But what I will say is, if you really want the basic thing you can do to work with bees, is to let some things slide. And that's what I mean when I show you a bunch of down trees right here and a bunch of trash and a bunch of sticks laying on the ground. This is the habitat that our native bees, which are really, incidentally, not just honeybees, but the native bees who we've talked about before and who were just pictured on that echinacea plant. They're the real important ones. They really love nothing more than Pennsylvania woods. And if you've been into Pennsylvania woods, you know that they're a little bit messy. They've got trees that have fallen down. They've got sticks that are laying on the ground. They've got this tree right here. You can see has the whole root ball is upended. And so you can actually see the roots of the tree. That's a great habitat for all kinds of things. The best thing you can do is to start thinking about the forest that's in your backyard. And if you might not have a forest, but you are part of Penn's Woods when you live in Pennsylvania, right? You are part of that ecosystem. Even if they've cleared out all the woods in your neighborhood and everything, you are still part of a forest, and you can be managing forest in your backyard. And we can talk about invasive species. We can talk about all the different things you could be doing to better manage it. But start thinking about it this way: is the more you're putting in grass and the more intensively you're managing parts of your yard, the less you're really letting bees thrive. Bees need food, but they also need habitat. And what tends to happen is, if you start to let things go, start to look like this in your yard, you'll find flowering species starting to move in. You'll find, for instance, in this ecosystem here, I've seen, what is it called? Spring beauties. They're tiny flowers that come around early spring, right? There might still be snow on the ground, but there's a flower now, and the bees can go work with that flower, get some nectar, get some pollen. And it's one of the first ones to emerge in the spring. That's really a matter of having a healthy woodland system. And so, yes, it's not pretty. It's not always the nicest looking thing. Your neighbors will not love it. However, this is where it starts, is good habitat and a good place to live. And the good place for the bees to live is not necessarily what the humans want it to look like. So that's an important thing to remember when we're thinking about bees and the best way to keep them. Some people have said that those problems you've mentioned, and maybe we can go into some of the big problems. Maybe we could do that in the next
Yeah,
session.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is because that's a question on everybody's mind. But one of the reasons, and sneak peek here, that they say maybe we've had this colony collapse disorder, we've had all the issues with bees, is destruction of habitat. Is that the bees no longer have the habitat that they need in order to thrive. And can we create the circumstances where we can have good habitat? Do I have that book? No, I don't know. There's a gentleman named, and maybe I'll bring in his book for the next session. Didn't even occur to me, but his name is Doug Tallamy. I think he's at the University of Delaware. And his big mission in life is to get people to set aside about a third of their yard as natural in order to create the national park in your backyard. And his idea is if we were all doing this and we all set aside a certain part of our yard, not all of it, not saying give up the area where you throw, a football or let your dog run around. But if you set aside some of your place for bee habitat, we would be improving health a lot. And it's a good argument. There's a national park down over Yellowstone that's public property. That's great that it's over there, but it's not in your backyard. And we need these habitats in all of the areas of our life, from strip malls to suburban backyards to cities and city roofs and all that kind of stuff. This is all very possible. It's very doable. It actually requires a lot less work than you want.
Right. Because you don't have to really, it's not about maintaining. It's not about beautifying. It's not about sculpting. It's about allowing it to be.
Exactly. So that's my main argument here, is that bees are fitting into the environment, not only on the flower side. I mean, we can talk about bee diet and so on, but in terms of habitat, they need a place to live, and they also need that food. So, right, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yep.
You need a place to live, and you need some food, and you need some water. That's actually another big thing I hear about with bees is I have a swimming pool, and bees keep coming to the swimming pool, and they're flying around the swimming pool, and what they're looking for is a drink.
Right.
And that's a great way to that's something else you can set up in your yard very easily. You can plant a garden. You can, leave some dead wood around for bees to live in. But putting out some water dishes with rocks in them, you'll find that come spring, you're going to have a whole bunch of bees flying around your yard because they need to drink just like you and me. Do have one other shout out for it's not a bee, but it is a pollinator.
Okay.
It's the yellow jacket. And,
right, which terrifies everybody.
Right. Nobody likes yellow jackets,
yeah.
Right? However, and I actually wrote an article once, it was called Yellow Jackets, and it was something my neighbor said to me. He said, what is the point? What is the point of a yellow jacket?
Right.
And it was a funny thing to say. What's the point of it? Well, they have a role, and one of those roles is pollination. You will see yellow jackets doing their own pollinating. Not quite as much as bees, but they do it as well. The other things that that the yellow jackets do that is underrated is just like the buzzards in your neighborhood.
Yep.
They also clean up dead animals.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was like their role.
Yes, they are. It's one of the things they eat is rotting flesh. That is one
Excellent.
thing that they do.
Yeah.
So it is definitely not a well-known fact, nor does it really make people forgive them for all the things that they've done to human beings, yellow jackets. But it is one of their roles in the ecosystem, is they're out there pollinating. And then when they're trying to feed their young, they also want some meat to feed their young, and that's what they'll do. So if you'll find some kind of rotting something, you'll sometimes find the yellow jackets crawling all over it, and you'll be like, what the heck is going on here? Well, that's what's happening. So yes, am I getting this across to you?
Absolutely. Bees will I'm not sure that everybody sort of understood that creating that sort of natural space
Mhm.
is more important probably than growing wildflowers, because yes, you're giving them a lot of food, but that's all fine and dandy if they can't live near where the food is. Because it's not like
Yeah.
they're traveling for days to get food. They need to have their food and their house close to each other because that makes them much more efficient.
Yes, exactly. And here's a I'm gonna see if I can find a picture here of. So I do have a picture here of a tree in a park. This is a perfectly fine tree in a park. This is a big catalpa. It's actually at Burke's Nature Center,
Oh, yeah.
or Burke's Heritage Center,
Mhm.
over on the Tulpehocken Creek.
Yep.
And this is great, right? It's a giant tree. It's actually one of the biggest trees in the state. And actually, there's Sarah. She's standing in front of it to show how big this stinking tree is.
Yeah,
But what
and catalpas are huge.
they're free, they're just gigantic, and
Yeah,
they're
and they have
great
huge
trees.
leaves and
But what you see is this is surrounded by the grass, right? The
yeah.
ever-present grass all around it. That's fine. However, what bees love is bare ground. And so if you can create situations where there's no grass, again, ugly as heck, but if you have an area of your yard that you just keep a corner, no grass, you let the leaves fall on it in the fall, create a mat of leaves, you just leave it be. Don't do anything with it. You will find that you will look in the spring and you'll see all kinds of, in a month or so, you're going to see it. You're going to see bees emerging out of the soil. They are crawling up because some of the bees actually nest in the soil in the winter. That's what they do. They will dive down drill a hole into the ground and live under there. So that's, again, one of these things you don't really think about, but you have to think of forest floor. That's what you're
Yeah.
thinking of.
Yeah.
That's what the forest floor is like generally. So that's where they're fitting into the ecosystem, right?
Well, I gotta say, I think we all have a fourth grade knowledge of bees, and
Sure.
most of us probably haven't thought about anything beyond that. Even when we buy honey, we just get excited that it comes from
Yeah.
orange blossoms or lavender or clover or whatever you buy your honey, tupelo blossoms. And
Yes.
I love that everybody watching is now like,
Yeah.
some tips to be able to I get this better. I
Mhm.
understand how bees are, how they really fit, and how they have these little nuances that make them so unique, and how, frankly, we need to be better stewards
Yeah.
so that they can live.
And
That's
it's not
awesome.
hard to be a steward, and that's, I want
Yeah.
people to understand that, right?
Yeah.
You can do it. You can absolutely do it. It's not too hard. And it's all with, if you have, even if you have a fire escape at your apartment that you
Right.
have access to,
Yeah.
you can do some things to bring these animals into your circle and be a good steward of them and take care of them. And yeah, you'll find a lot of enjoyment. That's where I started gardening. That's where Sarah and I started gardening, was the fire escape of our first apartment. We had a mint plant in a pot that we put up there, and that was it. And that's a good place to start for sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. We will see you again and talk about another part of bees and the sneak peek that we drop every time. Bees are coming to the library in one form or another.
Well, I got some good news about that actually yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. That we are pretty good to go. And so come May, possibly into the first week of June or so, we should, in time for summer reading in any case, have
Absolutely.
bees at the library. So you will be able to observe bees who live at the library. And maybe, I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but maybe I need to do like a camera in hand show of how that'll work. I don't even know how that'll work, but it will be something we can talk about. But we did get, preliminary approval to get all that done. So
Yeah, we're very excited. And this is where I think that those of us who are adults are probably more excited than kids right now because we've been
Yes.
thinking and talking about this for over a year.
Yeah,
And
and it's all because of you, Kelly, and it's
well,
all because you found that grant.
I
That's
did. I found a grant through Wegmans to make this
yes.
possible. And I was just so excited because he's such a bee person. And it's
Yeah.
so cool to learn all the stuff that I happened to come across this. And I thought this could be a wonderful thing for us. And I'm just so excited that we're going to be able to have programming around it. And I mean, all the stuff for kids and adults, it's just going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and we'll have to talk about the lettuce as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Stay tuned because another episode, Will and I will divert from bees, but we have a lettuce tower going into the library that I'm quite sure will make your jaw drop when you walk in.
Yeah, it's gonna be something.
It's
Maybe
gonna
have Mike on to talk about it.
yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
It's awesome. Thank you, Will. See you again.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.